Amazing. Oh, hi there. Lord Kuma here. Just looking over some notes I made for making this video in my handy dandy little notebook. I was just going over some facts and figures about the legendary racehorse Secretariat. It's pretty amazing stuff. I don't know how old any of you are that are out there, but anybody that's, well, older than me, in the generation before mine. I was born in 75, and Secretariat won the Triple Crown 2 years before I was born. He won it in 73. I decided that for the younger generations that might like horses or may not know who Secretariat is, I thought I'd make a video to kind of explain who he was and why he was important. So, to lay out some basic facts. He was born on March 30th, 1970, at a place called Meadow Farms in Doswell, Virginia. He died October 4th, 1989, in Claiborne Farms in Paris, Kentucky. His sire, or daddy, was named Bold Ruler. He was a horse that was known for speed and was a very good short and medium distance racehorse. Very well mannered horse, known to be a gentleman and very playful. His dam, or his mama, was named Something Royal out of a sire named Prince Quillo. She was known, and that whole line of horses were known as stamina horses. They could go longer distances, mile and a half, mile and 3/4, 2 miles, 2.5 miles, those kind of things. Not as common over here. They don't have those real long distance races over here. They do in England, which I believe is where Prince Quillo was from. I believe he was either an English or an Irish horse. He stood 16'2". If you don't know what that means, horses are measured in hands. Each hand is, I think, 4 inches, something like that, 4.5 inches. And so they literally, before they had measuring tapes, they would just measure them from the ground up, putting their hands on top of each other. So he measured 16 hands in two. 2 parts of a hand, or 2 inches, or something like that. But his official measurement was 16'2". His weight was officially listed on his site as 1,200 pounds. Now, to put that in perspective for you, most racehorses, most thoroughbreds that I've come across are generally somewhere around 1,000 pounds, give or take a few pounds here and there. There are some that are lighter; they would go for in at 900 pounds. There are some that are bigger, and he was one of the bigger ones. He was 1,200 pounds. He probably wasn't that heavy when he won the Triple Crown. He was probably a little lighter than that, maybe 1185, 1175, something like that. And in his career, after he was done racing, they set him out to stud at Claiborne Farms. He foaled 653 foals, little baby horses. Of those 653, 57 of them were stakes race winners. Stakes are considered to be more important races than others. 57 of them were stakes winners. That's pretty impressive. It's nothing to sneeze at. Let's put it that way. So, why was Secretariat important? So in 72, he starts his racing career. He goes basically undefeated his whole entire 2-year-old year, except for his very first race. His very first race, and I may show it on this channel at some point, and kind of let you know what I'm talking about. But his very first race, he was lined up in a gate next to this horse called Quebec. Came out of the gate and took an immediate left-hand turn and slammed right into Secretariat. Just went, pew. Almost knocked Secretariat down to his knees. Really threw him off stride. And he struggled the rest of that race to kind of make up that ground that he lost. He got stuck in behind horses. He had to swing out real wide, which made him travel further. But he was, by all accounts, he was really coming on at the end. And if the race had been any longer, he'd have probably caught the front runners. But he ended up finishing fourth and did damn good to do that. From that point until basically the end of that year, he went undefeated. He won every race. Some he won big, some he won by a little, but he won every race. Now, there was one race that he was disqualified in, and it was called the Champagne Stakes, and he just bumped this much smaller horse than him and threw him off stride, and they gave him a penalty for it and disqualified him from first place to second place. From what I've heard and what I understand about the way they call penalties now, that infraction would not be called a penalty, and he would have not been disqualified for that infraction now. Although, with the way the Kentucky Derby was last year, who knows what it's doing right now. He goes into his 3-year-old year, picks up pretty much where he left off. Winning races, went through, and I think he raced 2 or 3 times before the final tune-up, before the Kentucky Derby. I know he raced the Gotham Stakes, won that pretty handily, actually. He raced in the Bayshore Classic in a very sloppy, muddy track, and won that. And everything was running really smoothly until the Wood Memorial. Now, the Wood Memorial was the final race before the Kentucky Derby. The final, what they call prep race. He lost, and he lost badly. He came in third. He photo finished for third. Well beaten by a horse called Angle Light, and in second place, right behind Angle Light, was a horse who would become his rival named Sham. He was the main rival. He was from California. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, not even the jockey who was riding him, Ron Turcotte, knew, is that under his front lip, where his teeth meet the gums, or teeth meet the lip, on the upper lip, he had a boil. He had an abscess. He had gotten stuck with a hay jagger or something like that, a haythorn. Haybriar had got up inside there and stuck him in the lip and kind of stuck there, and it festered, and it got infected. Well, when a horse has a bit in their mouth, it's like this. And when if you can picture a horse's long snout, when you pull back on it, it pulls your lip down. And it was pushing on that boil. So every time, when you ask a racehorse to go, you don't throw the reins away and let him just give him his head. You tug on the reins a little bit, and it drives the bit into his mouth, and he feels that, and he grabs the bit, and he goes. That's where that saying comes from. He really took the bit between his teeth. That's what that means. Well, Secretary couldn't do it. Every time Ronnie would tug on him, it would pull down on that boil, and Secretary would throw his head back like this, because it hurt. Ronnie couldn't figure it out. He didn't know what was wrong. He thought he was doing something wrong. Anyway, Secretariat goes and races in the Kentucky Derby. Nobody really knew if he could do it. At the beginning of the year, his owner, the owner of Meadow Stables, where he was born. His owner died. Mr. Chenery, who owned him and owned that farm, who had been in a coma for over a year, finally passed away. In those days, the government's death tax or estate tax was a whopping 70%. And the government came with their hand out and said, the estate's worth $10 million. You owe us $7 million cash. Well, they didn't have it. So they took the one thing that they had that was of value and sold it, and that was Secretariat. And what they did was they syndicated his breeding rights. And they raised $6.08 million on his breeding rights, and that saved the farm. And not only did it save the farm, it saved all the mares and the yearlings and the weanlings and the baby horses. And it also saved a horse who had won 2/3 of the Triple Crown the previous year, named Reaver Ridge. Reaver Ridge, after the Belmont kind of fell apart, really went downhill. His career was kind of teetering. He needed some time to kind of figure out and get better and kind of recuperate and get his career back on track. So they couldn't really sell him because he really wasn't worth anything, breeding wise. I mean, his stock had fallen way down. So they took Secretariat and they syndicated him for $6.08 million. And at the time, that was a record. And if you break that down and do the math at how much he weighed, I think he weighed 1,185 pounds at the time. Gold was selling for $90 an ounce. If you break it down as to what he got paid for, he was worth something like $270 an ounce. So he was worth just about 3 times his weight in gold, which is kind of ridiculous to think about.